Welcome back everyone to the Blender Creator course, Stylized 3D Models, and this is how we left it off. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play you a short video which will take up the rest of this lesson, showing you how to bring in your own textures, and they can be found in the download pack. So in your download pack, you're actually going to have the setup, which is the setup which you already opened, which was the asset manager, and then you're also going to have the texture maps, and all of the texture maps can be found in here. If you open any of these, you'll see that we have a texture map for each of the height, the base color, the metallic, the normals, and the roughness, just in case you want to put them into, your own scenes, or you want to play around with them yourself. So let's just put that back, and now I'll play this for you, and hopefully by the next lesson, you'll actually understand how we can bring these in. The last thing I'm going to do before doing that is I'm going to go to Preferences, I'm going to go to Add-ons, and I'm going to bring in a node, that an actual add-on that we're going to need, which is called Node Wrangler. So let's come in, click Node Wrangler on, let's close that down, let's save out our work now, and then on the next lesson, we should be ready to rock and roll. All right, everyone, so I hope you enjoyed that. See you on the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Welcome everyone to this short introduction on importing texture maps and creating materials within Blender. Here we'll be going through basic material setups and easy ways to import your texture maps all within Blender. Then we'll be moving on to an explanation of what maps do and why they're important. So with all that said, let's get started. So in this basic scene that I've set up, you will see that I've got these three objects and they're all UV unwrapped. So now let's come to our first object. And let's say we've already marked our seams, as you can see. Now let's come up to Edit first of all. And what we're going to bring in is an add-on called Node Wrangler. And this is going to make it very easy to set up materials within your scene. So let's come to Edit, come down to Preferences, come over to where it says Add-ons, and then we're going to search for Node, N-O-D-E, and you'll see one called Node Wrangler. Make sure that's ticked on, and then let's close this down. Now what I want to do is actually create our material. So if we come over to the right hand side, you'll see this little football kind of icon. Let's click on the plus, and then what that actually does is create a new material, and let's click new and give it a name. So let's call this wood. And because I've already created a wood, it will come up as wood.001. If you've got a 001, it will come up as wood.002 and so on. You'll notice as well that this has come in as a principled BSDF, and this basically is the magical node shader within Blender that makes it easy to import all your maps and things like that. So now we've got this, what we need to do now is we need to head on over to our shading panel, which is this button here. Once in the shading panel, you'll see basic setup, same as what we had in the modeling panel. And now if I zoom out of here a little bit, you'll see that we've actually got a basic setup already. So we've got our material output, and of course, this is where all the nodes end up in the end. Then we've got our principled, which is what I told you about, is the magic kind of Blender node. And if we zoom in a little bit, you'll see we've got all of these things where we can plug things in, or we can mess around with these without actually a map plugged in. So now let's come and click on our principled BSDF. And what we're going to press is Control, Shift, and T. And that then will open up the file of where you want to actually find your map. So make sure you store them in a place where you know where they are. Go and find them, and then you should end up with 5 maps. Normally it's 5 maps that actually you can download. One is the base color, the next one down is metallic, the next one down is roughness, the next one down is height, and then you've got normal. They're normally the basic 5 maps. So now what we need to do is we need to come to the first one and shift select the bottom one, and then that'll select them all. And then come over to where it says Principled Texture Setup and click that on. And there you go. They've all actually come in. And you'll notice Blender has automatically set everything up for us. And this is part of what the Node Wrangler actually does. Now, if we zoom in a little bit so we can see what we're doing, and now we can actually go through some of these nodes over here. So let's zoom into here as well. And the first one we've got is Texture Coordinates. Now, basically this node tells Blender whereabouts to place this texture on this object. So you notice at the moment, it's basically plugged in from the UV. Now, if we quickly just go over to the UV and I grab everything, you can see this is our UV map, and this is how basically this texture is placed on this. So for instance, you can see that this one has been turned around, so it's going the correct way. Now let's go back over to our shading panel. And if we plug in the generated instead to the vector, let it load up, and you'll see now that Blender is trying to generate how this texture is actually gonna go onto this object. This is useful for when you're creating textures within Blender itself without maps, but useless if you're actually bringing in your own map. So let's put it back on UV. Next one across is called mapping, and this basically is how this texture is mapped onto this object. So you can see here that we can actually move the location of our actual texture, and this basically is kind of moving the UV map. Now if we can also scale this up as well, as you can see, so you can stay a little smaller and bigger, and it gives you a lot of control within actually the shader to mess around with the scale and things like that. Normally I would actually do this in the UV map, but if there's any small details that I want to make, a little bit smaller or something like that, I will do it within the shader. Moving across, you can see that all of these nodes over here, which are our maps, are plugged into our mapping node. So let's come to the first one. The first one is color. And basically down on the right hand side here, I'm going to be showing you exactly what they mean. And then if you want more information, you can go onto the Blender website and find all of the rest of the information out about all of these maps that we're talking about. So as I say, the first one is the color. And if we unplug that, it's basically what we can see is it's just the base color. Now, sometimes you will get colors where they come in with ambient occlusion, and I'm going to talk about ambient occlusion just in a few minutes. So if we plug this in, we can see we can actually alter the color with other nodes that we can kind of slide into here. So I'm quickly going to show you that. So if we press Shift A, do a search, and we'll just bring in a gamma, which is just going to lighten or darken our actual color. Now I've put that in there, and you can see if I bring that down or bring it up, I can make it much darker or much lighter. So that's something that we can actually do, and the Node Wrangler enables us to bring in a new node and just drop it in there. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to delete that, and I'm going to plug that in. Now to go on to the next map is metallic, so I'm just going to head on over where I've actually brought in a metallic texture. So here we are in our setup now with our actual metal texture and material. So if we zoom in now, we can see that we have the next one down, which is metallic, and we can see that if we come and actually unplug that, you'll see that not a lot happens, and this is because this metallic is very closely based on the metallic that's already there, which is 0. It's quite a dull metal. Now if we come in and we turn up our metallic, you can see that it goes really metallic like so. And you don't have to actually use a map to make something metallic. All you need to do is turn up this metallic. Now normally when we're doing things like using this slider here and no map, either something is metallic, so if I turn this down, or it isn't, like so. We don't really have anything in between when we're not actually using a map. So if we plug this back in now to our metallic and let it load up, and there you go. Now the next one down is roughness, and roughness is basically, if you think of a sheet of glass, when you look at it, it's not completely see-through. You might have certain scratches on there, you might have things like smears, hand marks, things like that, and basically that is what the roughness map does. Basically the roughness is determined by this map. So if I unplug this map, you can see we've got a lot of kind of shinier parts and duller parts on here. So let's unplug this, and then you'll see that it's all one kind of shine. You can also see if I come in and actually turn the roughness up or turn it down, I can make something like ice, or I can make something very dull. And this is why we use this map, because it gives us a lot of control of how much smearing and things like that, and makes it look a lot more realistic. So now let's move over back to our wood, and what we'll do is now we'll come down and look at our normal map. So if I double tap the A quickly, that'll just unhighlight this, and then we can just zoom in a little bit and look what this normal map does. As you can see, the normal map always plugs into a normal map node, and then we can mess around with the strength. So if I turn this strength right up, you can see now we've got a lot more pushing through of that actual texture. Now just be very careful when using this node. You can turn it up too high, and it won't look very real, in other words. So try and just get it somewhere where you're really happy with it and it still looks realistic. For instance, you do get some wood which looks like this, where it's really kind of elevated from the base, but I wouldn't go again too high with this. Okay, so that's the normal map, and now let's move to the displacement map. For the displacement map, I'm actually going to bring in a new material now, so I'll head on over to that one. So here we are with our cobblestone texture, which we're going to use for our displacement example. So what displacement does is it basically gives this texture, it basically pushes it out. It's like using tessellation, as you'll see shortly. But the one thing is, if you're using this displacement map, you really need to know two things. First of all, it doesn't work in Eevee. Second of all, it really needs a lot more geometry than what you would normally have. So here we can see we've got a flat plane, and we can see that they're slightly pushed up, and you can still see that this is basically a 3D texture. So how do we create displacement on this? First of all, what we're going to do is we're going to come over to our little spanner. So first of all, what we're going to do, we're actually going to subdivide this a couple of times. So let's press tab, and what we're going to do is right click and subdivide. Right click, subdivide. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to press tab, and we're going to bring in a modifier. And what we've done now is basically increase the geometry a lot. So let's come over to add modifier. We're going to come down to where it says multi-resolution. I'm going to subdivide, subdivide, and again, 4 times. And now if you press tab, you'll see that it still actually looks like this. So you can't really see all the subdivisions on here. But when we finish this, I'll actually apply it, and then you'll be able to see them. Next of all, what we need to do now is we need to put this on cycles. So if we come over here and we change it from Eevee and we put it on cycles, and then what we can do is we can come down now to our material, which is this button here, scroll down, and you'll see one where it says settings, and under settings you'll have one that says surface. And what you need to do now is change this. It should say bump only. Change this to displacement and bump. Once you've done that, then all you need to do is go to your cycles shader, which is this button here, and there we go. You can see now how actually realistic that looks. And now you can actually mess around with these, so we can really bump up the scale, as you can see, and we can also change the mid-level like so. So it really pushes it out, or you can really pull it in as well. Okay, so that's a bit of an explanation on there. Now, as I said, I will move over now to the actual spanner where our modifier is on. I'm going to press Ctrl A to apply that. I'm going to press Tab, and now you can see just how much geometry that actually took. Now, you can get away with a little bit less geometry. So if I press Ctrl Z and just bring it back, and just bring it down 1. So if I bring this down 1, like so, and you can see that it's still looking quite good. But if we put the viewport level up a little bit, it's nowhere near the level of this. So if I put it on 3, press Ctrl A, press the tab button, you can see now there's not so much geometry, but we're still getting a pretty decent effect. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you is if we come back to our material shader and we put this back on Eevee. So if we come to our computer icon, put it back on Eevee, and now we'll just scroll around and zoom in to this wood. Now, what does ambient occlusion do? So I'll put a brief explanation down the right hand side of what actually ambient occlusion is, but we can actually enable it by coming over to our computer, putting this on Eevee, and you'll have one that says ambient occlusion. When you click this on, you can see already that we really get much more shading on here, much more realism and things like that. Now, as I said, you can get textures where they have ambient occlusion already built in, but I find actually doing it this way generally gives you a better result. Now, the other thing you can do is you can mess around with the ambient occlusion and really bring it up or down, mess around with factors and things like that, and really get kind of the shadows that you really want on the surface of your actual object. So that concludes the material and texture introduction part of the course, and I hope you all got a lot out of it and have a much better understanding of maps and materials within Blender. So with that said, let's get on with the show.